And I just feel like if we can just be like, I mean, it's just like you get so fired up about the potential of this team, and I feel it too, but I'm like, I probably can't hear it the same like when I get fired up. You know what I mean? It's evangelical.
Well, I think it's for both of us though, because when you get fired up, like I'm all fired up. You know what I'm saying? So like,
yeah,
it's that passion that each one of us produces that we don't necessarily see what the other one's doing. So,
for sure, bro.
But it's kind of baller. Sure. I like it. I like it feeding off the other brother. So some people are like, "Oh, working with a family member, man, that's difficult." But fuck that shit, man. Good ball.
Yeah, there's some. I gotta send in some bullshit, but other than that, yeah.
Dude, I smoked a J the first time for since 2 months, man. Yeah, dude.
That's it. That's the whole story.
That was it. That's my story, man. I was really blitzed. I was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting it to be that high. But
yeah.
Good stuff, man.
For real. That's good. That's a good feeling. Dude. So
no, dude. I want to go back to the thing that we talked about last podcast that we kind of ended the episode, and I want to expand it a little bit. I'm thinking about the J-Dub thing, right? And that 4 spot is so crucial to the existence to the 5-out offense, right?
So you see J-Dub as a 4.
No, I don't necessarily see him as a 4. I think that he could play that position very well in the 5-out offense. On a typical old school offense, I don't think he has a chance to play in that 4 position.
Doesn't he strike you as more of a shooting guard, point guard than a...
Yeah, but wouldn't you call Kenny Hustle more of a shooting guard?
Yeah, I mean, because of his size,
guess what position he played last year, though?
Probably more like small forward, right?
He played forward position. And I understand that people are going to say power forward, small forward. That position for the Thunder is the same position. I mean, we use it as a forward. It doesn't matter if you're 6'4" and you're Dort, or you're 6 or 7 foot and Poku. You're going to play those positions, that forward position on all scales. So, yeah, I look at that position at that 4, and there's so many ways it could go. If we keep Chet at that true 5 position on that 5-out offense, because here again, if Chet's coming down and guarding that 4 position right away, and allowing Baisley or allowing JRE or J-Dub or whoever to make that first contact with the 5, which it's like 5 seconds, 6 seconds of the offense, because you think about the time that players bring up the ball on a typical basis, it takes about 5 seconds to get that ball up the court. So you get that first contact. Man, I would love to see Baisley or JRE take those guys, use that for the first contact, and then switch them out on, obviously with the switch. But the reality is that we both know is that teams are going to actually encourage, as Chet is starting to be known as a shot blocker, is the switch isn't going to keep on coming. They're not going to want to put Chet down the center against their center to put Chet in the middle, right?
Right.
So it's going to work a whole lot better when all of a sudden teams recognize that, okay, we don't want Chet blocking our shots there, so we'll let him play our 4 guy who's going to play out on the perimeter more. And that's what will happen. They'll be switching Chet with the 3 guy and the 4 guy, and that's how I see them switching with Chet rather than putting him down the middle on offense. So on defense, with that being said, is that, man, they're going to go to the switch immediately for the big man, okay? So if they're going from JRE or Baisley, right, and they're switching those 2 guys, and they're trying to get Baisley off on the shooting guard or whoever, then, or the point guard, then I could see us looking at it and being like, all right, let's get another guard in there. So yes, we'll have, Josh Giddey at 6'9" or 6'10", whatever he is now, guarding a big man, or we'll have J-Dub guarding a big man inevitably. But those guys, though, the way their arms are and the way their height is, I don't see it like a typical mismatch in the NBA. Like we're like, oh, look at DeAndre Ayton is matched up against Isaiah Thomas. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, that's a huge mismatch.
Yeah.
But we don't have that height, distribution or whatever, like most teams do, because we have drafted so well that these guys that, like J-Dub, who's 6'6", 6'7", and has a 7'2" wingspan. I mean, that makes him an incredibly difficult person to, guard, whether it's a shooting power forward or shooting small forward or a shooting guard. Like, he can guard those positions across the board. And the more we see what's happening in the NBA, there's not a lot of old school pound-it power forwards left. There's just not. I mean, most of them have branched out and started becoming that new school offensive power forward, allowing somebody like J-Dub to take a ton of minutes at the power forward position.
All right, so I want to summarize what you just said, right? I think you're saying basically this idea that it's either Baisley or JRE at the 5 is a false dilemma. Chet, shift him over to the 5. And
he's way more ready than we've ever thought he was going to be.
Okay, and then potentially look at running J-Dub, right? Jalen Williams from Santa Clara at a lot of 4 minutes, particularly in that closing lineup, right?
Listen.
Sell me on it, bro. Sell me on it.
I understand. It's going to take a little time before J-Dub breaks through.
What in his game do you think will fit so well with that unit?
What in his game doesn't fit?
Explain it to me like I've never seen him play before, bro.
I've been spending hours watching his film, watching how he plays defense, watching how he gets low on defense, watching how he switches on defense on power forwards that are much bigger than him. He's been able to absorb the contact down low in college basketball, and yes, it's not as big as a typical an NBA players are going to be, but he can proven that he's been able to absorb the contact down there. He's able to draw the mismatch, and the moment he gets that mismatch on offense, man, he's going downhill and he's scoring quickly. We can compare him to all these other players that we want, but I don't know if there's been another player that's more like Dwayne Wade than J-Dub is that we've ever seen before. He has that it factor, and if you're looking at him saying, okay, J-Dub coming off the bench as the sixth man makes sense, but the reality is that if he's as good as I think he is, then they're going to try to insert him into that starting lineup because that mismatch that he's going to create right away is going to be insane. And if you think about it, if we go out there and J-Dub, who can hold his own on defense, right, can hold his own on defense at the power forward position and the switching and all this other stuff that's going to happen, and he's able to hold his own, okay? Mm-hmm. On offense, he is going to tear apart any power forward, any small forward, anybody that's a little bit bigger and a little bit slower than him. He's going to make look foolish out there. He's going to be somebody that's going to be an it factor when it comes to being able to have this dominant utility player of sorts. You know how the NFL, they have a running back, a quarterback, and all these other positions? Well, then you have, all of a sudden, you have a utility guy that's getting drafted because nobody really knows where he's going to go. But they know that he's an athlete, right?
Right.
And that's what I see with J-Dub is he has that it factor as an athlete, and that's what gets me excited, man. That's what gets me really pumped up is because I don't know how far this can go with J-Dub.
I think one way to describe his game is he has excellent old man game. And as you have been around the game for a long time, having game that ages well is really critical. You probably, even if you're a top 10% player, everything minus LeBron, right? If you're top 10% athlete or whatever in the NBA, like your peak athleticism is only going to last maybe 6 or 7 years, right? But if you have game that ages well, you can easily play 15 years in the league if you choose to. If you become like one of those elite players, right? Like, and even if you're not an elite player, but you find a way to be like what you're talking about, an excellent utility player, like you can still get 12, 13, 14 years worth of contracts because like the game is like shaped toward players like this. And like I've said it before, but we fell in love with Jalen Williams because like his wingspan, like that's what in the pre-draft process I fell in love with about him. But when I started watching his game, it was his control with the ball, his ability to play at his own pace, and like you said, which is critical in today's NBA, he can get downhill. But because he doesn't get out of control, he can also utilize that step back three in a way that is very reminiscent of the players who kind of like dominate the league right now. So I'm not saying that he's going to be that player, but those are all good signs about his particular like skill set.
Yeah, man, you're absolutely right. One thing that yeah, man, I love it, and I think that there's certain types that you look at certain guys, right? And I've heard it explained before, but there's a video out there right now of Draymond Green right now, and he's explaining to a bunch of campers, and he's saying that like there's only 2 or 3 guys on a team that can do anything they fucking want. That can shoot the ball. That can do no defense, no practice, doing nothing. Just getting by, right? There's only 2 or 3 guys like that. Everybody else is a fucking role player. Okay? And I love it how he explained it, but I've obviously, if you've been around the league like Mark and I have, and most of the people that have been listening to us have been around the game, you've all heard the same thing. You've got your stars and then you got your role players. But explaining it to kids in that way, and he was getting after a camper because the camper wasn't getting back on the line drill, right? And to me, that's how it is. Like you have to be willing to give it all. You have to be willing to put it out there at all times. And I see guys that are like J-Dub and that like our Kenny Hustle, and I say, okay, this is the type of guys that you want on the team. These are the type of guys that change everything for you. And when we talk about J-Dub, I get so stoked because every day in practice, man, I know for a fact he's up against Kenny Hustle. He's up against Dort. He's up against Chet. He's up against, all these other guys that are great, phenomenal athletes. And the coaches are all watching him and observing what he can do. And by watching his film, I know, Sam Presti and the coaching staff already have this idea of where he wants to play and where they want him to play. But we've proven before we don't mind going small ball with a 6'6" power forward. Like that's nothing to us. Like we go out there with a 6'8" center. So a 6'6" power forward isn't that big of a deal. And somebody like J-Dub who is just thirsty for minutes, man, just get him out there. And I don't know if he's going to end up becoming a starter right off the bat. I don't know if he's going to be one of those guys that we look back and say, steal of the NBA draft. But I have this feeling about him. And, it's the same feeling I got when Josh Giddey was coming and playing for us. And I got this feeling like I was like, Josh Giddey's going to have to earn his starting position. And then it was like, boom, Josh Giddey had that starting position. And it was just like, well, it was silly that we even thought that anybody else was going to start there,
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's with J-Dub is that like maybe they don't have intentions of starting him right away. But, man, you look at this team and the skill level on defense is truly spectacular. You got Dort, obviously. You got Kenny Hustle. You got Chet, J.R.E., Jalen Williams, obviously. These guys are all phenomenal defenders. And it goes back to what I was saying a second ago, is that you have your 2 or 3 stars, do whatever the fuck you guys want, shoot the ball, take 20 shots a game, and then you've got your role players. and this team is full of star role players, and it's kind of exciting to see.
Yeah, it's something we always hear, like, the great coaches talk about, and more importantly, it's not about talking about it, but they're able to convince their players at a high level and get a lot of buy-in. But if you can become a star in your role, then, and you have a few of those guys, like, and you've got the stars, then you got a chance to win a championship. And we have a bunch of those guys. We've spent a lot of episodes talking about it.
We're locked them up.
Yeah.
And which means that we know the importance of them.
So let's just talk about it, man. Like, explain to me how you think a typical practice, not yet, I mean, training camp hasn't started, but, like, where it goes, J-Dub versus, right, Dort, full court. How's that going to improve J-Dub's game?
Well, it's good. I mean, first of all, I fully believe that there's these points that leaders teach, right?
Right.
Okay, so he's going up against Dort, and Dort's going to shut him down the first 10 times down the court, you know?
Right.
And J-Dub's going to get a little upset, and Dort's going to come down because he's a leader and say, hey, listen, man, if I'm guarding you like this means you got to do this, right? So he's teaching him how to read the defender, okay? And as the time's going on, whether it's Kenny Hustle that's doing that with him, dude, the way that practices go, yes, Coach D is out there coaching and stuff like that, but I guarantee you have all these other players that are coaches that are pulling the guys aside. And, you know, it reminds me the year after I graduated high school, and I would go back and help out with the school or the team, the Storm. And I would go back and I would go, you know, for a day or 2 days, and I would help out with the different programs, you know.
Right.
And to me, like, we would have 3 or 4 ex-players in these practices, helping out the players, pulling them aside and saying, hey, when you do a drop step, you have to close out here. You have to do this. You have to go back door like this. And having that mentorship, right, is everything for a young player. And when you're having guys like, you know, Kenny Hustle that has proven to be one of the, you know, best hustle players in the NBA, and then you have Dort, who's one of the best lockdown defenders in the NBA. Like, these guys are just eating this shit alive, man. Like, you have, like, one of the best bones defense in the league that nobody really knows about. And the other thing that's really insane about this team is none of the experts, and I'm sure there's some experts that understand where this team's going to be at, but none of the experts are truly picking up the whiff of what's happening in Oklahoma City. And I think they're using this as a, you know, motivation, being like, listen, guys, people are saying we're going to be one of the worst teams in NBA history. Yeah. You know, like, winning 18 games with one of the worst teams in NBA history. That's what people are saying that we're going to win this year. Like, I get it. They think that Sam Presti is in this, you know, lockdown, you know, tank mode, right? But it goes back to what you and I've talked about is, you know, I started scouting out the 2024 NBA draft, man.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time there. Like, why would Sam Presti trade so many draft assets for next year instead of splitting the draft assets up, you know? And that 2024 draft, bro, is disgusting. It is amazing. It is something that everybody needs to stop and take a look at. And we have the Utah Jazz top 10 pick, right? We have Houston's top 4 pick. That's protected. Yeah. Top 4. That's it. Top 4. Like, we have some very valuable picks here.
Call them the crown jewels, right?
Yeah, and this is the whole thing that we've all been waiting for. Let's just say the Thunder pick number 5, and we have a couple other picks there that are in the back end, you know, and we're able to take 5 and whatever numbers and move up into the top 3 and pick out one of these and create. I mean, this is the type of thing that I can see Sam Presti doing. And, bro, like, that's what's so inspirational when it comes down to it, is we could take these picks and we could just trade them and be done with it, right? But, you know, Houston's tanking this year, and then next year they're going to try to do something. But by then, you're going to have all these young teams that are in the NBA playoffs already that Houston's got an uphill battle. And you know what? They could end up being in that, like, 7th or, you know, 10th or 11th seed, you know, type thing. But it's still such a gold pick, man. That's still like 8 or 9, you know, in a really strong draft. This is why I'm excited about it. Is that 2023? It's a good draft at the top end, but if you don't get one of those special picks, man, then you're done. And kind of the next year after that, bro, you've got some incredible talented players from France that are coming over. We got Overturn, Elite. You've got, there's some incredible players out there right now. And that's why I keep on going back to this, is that this is the year that we have to figure out everything. Where does Bazley fit? Like, his contract is coming up. We need to figure out what he's going to do, because if he's going to go out there and average 14 or 15 points a game and he snatches that power forward position away from everybody else, man, right? Then guess what? Bazley's earned that. But at this point,
bro, it's not going to happen, bro.
But listen, I like Bazley a lot. Okay, every single time I get an opportunity, every time I get an opportunity, I always look at Bazley and I say, what if he does this? Bazley's the one person I look at out of all the guys that we have on this team as being the one player that I think that could turn it around and average 14 to 16 points a game, average 7 rebounds, and have quality minutes out there. Doesn't mean I think he's going to close out games.
Okay, but if he does that, that's not good enough to snatch the power forward spot and just kind of end the conversation, because I think on the flip side of it, you're going to have, like you said, like a J-Dub situation where he can, kind of play different matchups, different ways. But look, I'm a big fan of Bazley, but one thing I've kind of come to a conclusion is, like, he's going to have to figure out how to be productive in a bench role before he earns that starting spot. Like, I think he was given a lot of opportunities to start. He did a good job with it, but he didn't do a great job. And then when he moved to the bench, it was kind of
one of the last players from the old regime,
Yeah, and I just feel like he was drafted for being young.
Yeah.
So to me, I think he could have a big year, but I think there's this mentality that there's a make or break year. Like, he'll probably get an affordable contract for the team if he doesn't have a great year. I think he sticks around.
Okay, so let's just bring it out. If you have minutes to give, are you giving them to Bazley or Poku? Because I feel like those two guys are going to be at it day one.
Well, we've always talked about, for us, since we've looked at this team and we added that extra player, to the depth chart, that we didn't really expect it at the 12th spot, or the 11th spot anyway from the Knicks. Like, we got 2 players, one for long term and one for now, and we felt like we were only going to go for the long term. So we got 2 players that we feel like will add to the depth chart right away, in Chet and J-Dub. I feel like we're about 15 deep. How do you get all those players in? It's about matchups. So there isn't going to be one player that takes all the minutes. It's not going to be Bazley or Poku. Poku wants to play the guard. We know that. And that's one of the things that makes him special. But also, he's prone to a lot of mistakes. And when he starts missing, things get ugly fast. But like Bazley, he can find himself where he's not impacting a game. And because of that, and for different reasons, Coach Daigneault has a really short leash with guys like him and Trey Mann. When they're not finding ways to impact the game outside of hitting shots, then he feels like they need to come out because, like you said, this goes back to that whole thing you were saying Draymond Green says, right? Like, there's only a few guys that can just do whatever they want. Everybody else has to be, a role player and understand their role, and then on top of that, become a star in their role for their team to succeed. And, yeah, these guys can knock down shots, but this also goes back to what Coach Daigneault talked about when we're talking about broccoli and Skittles, right? Like, everybody wants the Skittles, but you got to eat your broccoli. And getting that broccoli means, attacking the loose ball. When the big brings it down into the face of the guard, you tear it away from him. Anything you can do, step up, take the charge. That's how you earn those opportunities to knock down big shots in big games. That's it. I'll let you talk because I'm ranting right now.
You're good, man. Good stuff. But, speaking of charges, is that we've seen how Coach D prioritizes charges. We've seen it a lot. We've seen how he gets excited when we get charges out there. And then Sam Presti goes out and drafts probably the best guy that we've seen in the last few years at taking charges.
Crazy.
Like, come on. It's exactly what we need for that hustle moment. And there's so
Bro,
many
if
times...
he had stuck around for his junior year,
Yeah.
like, we would be talking... I don't know what the record is for charges, and it's probably held by like somebody like Shane Battier. But if he had stuck around for his junior year, I think he would have had a chance to break it. And that's just going off of him matching what he did his sophomore year. I don't know, man. I'm obviously just pulling shit out of my ass, but I think
you can't teach that, man. Like, listen. When I remember, we had a coach, Bob Hoffman. All right, now he's at University of Central Oklahoma right now. After he coached for Mercer, he beat Duke 1 year in I think it was the round of 64 in the NCAA tournament. So,
right.
But Bob Hoffman, right? He had a coach up at the Pan America, whatever Texas team he
Texas
coached up there for a while. Yeah, right. And he had a coach up there. I think his name is Bobby. And Bobby's whole class that he taught was how to take a charge properly. That was it. Like, how to take a charge, how to sell a charge so that refs can't help but call it, right? And here's the thing about the class. Nobody fucking paid attention to it. No one.
Right.
All right? And it was just kind of like, you know,
by the way,
Bobby's
the record for charges
taken...
taken... I'm sorry to cut you off. I want to hear what you're saying, but the record for charges taken, Battier with 111. And they called it an unbreakable record. Right? So, anyway, I'm sorry to cut you off, bro. But keep talking about that class that nobody paid attention to. I just proved it by distracting you in the middle of talking about a class that nobody paid attention to. But, yo, I know what you're talking about. I know that class. Bro.
Yeah.
Like, I'll tell you what.
It was all about creating the contact enough, right? Mm-hmm. Just waiting. Like, the contact's coming. So many people get scared of the contact, okay? But the contact's coming. If you just stand in there, okay, and when you get hit, you make a noise. Why do you make a noise? Because it's instinctual. When you get hit in the chest, guess what happens? Right? You make this noise as you're hitting the ground, and you slide. Now, there's an art to how to slide, okay?
Right.
And it's not like one of those things where you just hit the ground, because if you just hit the ground and fall backwards, 9 out of 10 times, they're not going to call anything because it's going to be like, oh, he just flopped. But if you get hit and you and slide, 9 out of 10 times they're calling that. And Bobby used to be like, man, he was crazy, but he would be like, you get him in the chest, hit him in the chest, boom, now you go down, and then slide, and you would, push off. And, like, I remember, like, I don't know, I had to be a sophomore when I really took out his class, and I was like, I'm going to learn how to do this. And it's, like, again, it's not easy to do. It's not easy to teach yourself how to do these things. So when you see somebody, like Shane Battier, that holds that record for, like, 111 or whatever the record is, and then you have somebody like Jay Will that does 56 in 1 year. I mean,
as a sophomore?
As a sophomore, then that's when you stop and say, okay, this guy's going to create 2 to 3 more possessions a game. And not just because he's going to take charges, but because he's going to make the offensive player coming down the lane second guess, and we'll get turnovers by that. He'll create 2 to 3 more possessions a game. And that's just, that's Draymond Green level, and that's where we've got to see this type of mentality with JRE, with Kenny Hustle, with Poku, with Baisley, any of these guys that are role players coming in the game. We have to see this. We need to get 2+ more possessions a game.
So, charges is Jay Will's superpower. JRE, I don't know. I feel like when I hear about his dad being in the, McDonald's All-American dunk contest against Kobe, I feel like that's kind of like his superpower. Like, everybody looks at him and they judge him by his height or his physique, but deep down he has this elite athleticism that people don't know about, and they misjudge all the time, including his opponents. And all of a sudden he's out there, he's snagging balls that people don't think he should be getting. He's creating extra tip opportunities like Nick Collison would, and kind of like flipping the court by everybody kind of leaning one way, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we got the ball and we're starting a fast break. He creates, I think, probably as many offensive rebound situations as anybody I can remember on the Thunder, right? Where maybe he's not always getting the offensive rebound, but he's creating those situations. You know what I mean?
Remember what I said last year after Game 5 or 12 or whatever it was of JRE playing? We got on a podcast and I was like, all I can say is I feel bad for Isaiah Roby. I just feel bad. I love Isaiah so much as a human being and as a player, but JRE just outplayed Isaiah Roby at a whole new level. And that's how I
wasn't willing to accept it, bro. I wasn't willing to accept it. But you you hit the nail on the head, dude.
But it was Isaiah Roby earned his position. He's going to be able to play out through the season. I knew that. But I knew at the end of the year that Isaiah Roby, there was going to be no spot if we used 4, draft picks, which obviously we did. So it was unfortunate, but I love the fact that we rewarded Isaiah by making sure that he had some money in the long run by picking up his contract like we did.
And he landed in a great spot for his career.
Great spot at San Antonio. Again, this is
like
another
a player his size with his skill set
that's going to look back.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's huge for his career,
for
man.
Sure, 100%, dude.
So that's where I consistently look at is I love the fact that we're talking about JRE and hustle plays right now because, we can talk JRE is going to be like the lead hustle guy on our team. But the crazy thing about it, man, is we can name probably 6 guys on this team that will be known as hustle players and that will be known as elite hustle players.
I mean, I think that's the thing with Dort is there were stretches over the last couple of seasons where he would get a few steals, charges, or kind of mix the two, tip balls and kind of take the other team's opportunity to shoot away from them for 3 or 4 consecutive possessions all by himself. And one of the things that, it's hard to remember when you see a player who doesn't play as many minutes as a guy like Dort, but Kenny Hustle has stretches like that too where it's a combination of all the things, like the diving on the ground for the loose ball, taking charges, utilizing his physique and his athleticism that people aren't accounting for. And ultimately, I think what makes Kenny Hustle's game really different, for me anyway, is that his ability to see where the ball's going and beat it to the spot. And now most of the time, a team is passing the ball to a spot where you can't reach it. But I think about 5% of the game is spent where the ball is just kind of up in the air and anybody can get it if they get there first. And that's what he excels in.
Well, and you look at this, though. We have so many of those players, and I know you just said that, but we literally have so many of those players where they excel at that 5%. And let's just be honest. How many times have we watched a game or been part of a game where a team is just completely getting out-hustled all across the court, right? And the end of the game in the last 45 seconds, the other team has been playing catch-up balls for so long that the game is now out of hand.
Yeah.
We've seen this. We've been part of it. We played in Oklahoma City. We played a team back in the day called Deer Creek. Obviously, if you're in Oklahoma, you know who Deer Creek is. Back in the day, they were just a bunch of guys running around like crazy animals, man. Just running around unbelievable. Nobody could catch up to them, right? And every single time we played them, I felt like I was always getting out hustled. And there's very few times that I ever felt like I was getting out hustled. But it wasn't by one player. It was by everybody on the team. Yeah. And it was always so frustrating because I'm like, I don't know what else am I supposed to give? These guys are out hustling me every single time. And, I think that's the thing is that we look at these opportunities and these moments and it's so demoralizing as a team when you're getting beat that badly. And
Yeah.
I think that's the whole goal of why we have so many of these guys on the team is because first you have Shea, Giddey, Dort, Chet. You have the main core right there. And then you start running all these guys in as mixing up and just fucking up everybody's systems and flows and, defenses and offenses, because at some point we'll probably have 3 7-footers out in the court with Mike Muscala, Chet, and Poku. We're going to have all these crazy lineups and mix-ups, and it's going to look insane out there. And teams are going to be like, how do we guard them? They play 5-out offense with 3 centers. How do we guard them?
Yeah.
That's how it's going to be. And that's why I keep going back to is that, teams are going to look at us as, this is how we want to build our teams. And we can look at the way that Houston built their team, their young core. We can look at the way that Detroit's built their young core, and we can say, yeah, that's cool. But the way that we built this core of young players and the surrounding players around them, dude, this is what teams are going to draft like in the future, because Sam Presti's been able to envision what it's going to look like and draft those players that, that teams are going to be like, holy shit. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be teams that like Detroit that will end up playing in the finals one year, right? Or, Memphis that will have battle after battle after battle. But there's going to be a moment that everybody's going to be like, that team is so far advanced than any of the rest of us that it's going to take everybody a while to catch up. And, that's why it's really impressive that we have the staple of these teams intact. We've got some questions like Baisley, that's a big question. But on the same sense is that Baisley position, we can draft or we can fill that in by a veteran that's looking to revitalize his career. So, what I'm saying? I get it. We can talk about this player, that player, but the reality is that now that we have what I would consider our 10 strong, we got 10 deep right now that aren't going anywhere for a very, very long time. Let's just throw it in there. 12 guys that aren't going anywhere for a very long time. Everybody else that gets added in, man, they're going to have to earn their position. It's going to be G League. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. They're going to have to earn it because it's going to be hard. Think about the lineups that we're going to have. Teams, and then even our players are going to have time breaking through. Shea could be one of those guys that is an all-star player, but his minutes as far as all-star players are concerned are the smallest amount because we are so deep that allows him to be able to kind of rest that first half of the season.
Right.
When I say
For
rest,
sure.
He still gets quality minutes, but he's not out there putting up 38, 39 minutes a game in the beginning part of the season, and by the end he's getting worn out. That's the beauty about having a deep team like this, is that we can rely on our starters for 28 minutes a game in the beginning and just let them get warmed up and work up to that 35 minutes a game if we even need to require them to do that this year.
So one thing I really love that you said a second ago, I wanted to get more from you on was and maybe we should just talk about it for a second and then come back and talk about it more on Friday. But when you said 5 out with 3 centers, we've talked a lot about the 5 out, but how would it look like? What would it look like if you did have 3 centers in there? We understand that each of the other centers would have to be able to play the guard position, right? Because 5 out includes 4 guards,
all right.
4 players who can play on the perimeter. But hold on. But would it be a rotation of who plays at the what exactly would that look like? And like I said, we shouldn't spend, because we've already gone way over time. And if anybody's listening at this point, it's because they obviously are at least a little bit curious about what the hell you're talking about, or I am anyway. Because shit.
So I have this way of thinking, right, of odd teams that I would see out there, okay? And I've got this book right here. My wife bought it for me, and I rock. And in the book, I have some teams in there. Obviously, a second ago, if Mark and I were talking, I was writing down something in the book. All right, said oddest team I want to see this year.
Yeah, let's hear it, dude.
All right, so it has. I have Giddy at the 1. All right, I have. After that, I have all 7.
No,
footers.
dude, start over because
Okay, I
it
say
broke
7
up
footers.
right when you started talking, dude. I haven't heard any of the people,
Oh, okay.
so start over again. Start over.
All right, Giddy, JRE,
Yeah.
Chet,
Okay.
Muscala,
Okay.
and that's all I had on my notebook. But man, you throw in
Give me somebody.
J Will.
Jay
You throw
Will.
in J Will. Right there we go. That's
right.
the odd team I want to see this year, because here's the thing: is that like JRE and J Will play different positions at the center position, whatever they're going to play. Like JRE can go straight up to that middle of the key position, you know.
Yeah.
And then you have J Will that could go in that step out, right? And then you just have all these different guys moving around at the 3-point range. Obviously, we'll probably never see that lineup, but that would be truly incredible if we do.
I was motivated when you told me 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have Poku in there too.
Oh,
okay?
okay.
So take out J Will, put Poku.
But either way, if it's J Will or Poku, you're talking about 4 centers and one 1 point guard or 1 true guard. But if you had Poku, you could have 2 point guards, and I mean it's confusing, but two point guards.
Well, listen, you have Chet, Giddy, and Poku playing guards.
Okay, let's just say we were like in a place that didn't matter, right? And we could have J Will and Poku, and we don't have Gideon at this point, right? So we had 5 centers.
Yeah.
Right, we could legitimately have 5 players who could play center, but Poku, because he can play point guard, right? He can make sure that gets it done.
Chet can run the 1 too.
Chet can run the run. JRE can play the wing. I mean, so.
Yep.
But in this situation, right? I think whenever we always talk about like a 4 out or a 5 out, anyway, we always talk about 5 out. 4 out is like what we used to hear about when we were playing and stuff, but now it's all about 5 out. So anyway, when we talk about 5 out, it's always who will play the 5, right? It's always like this one player goes in there and he plays the position that in the 5 out offense is anywhere from the high post that goes all the way to the 3-point line, and it includes the dunker spot or the step out, whatever you want to call it, and they kind of use this position where they stay 90% of the time outside the paint. And it creates space, it creates opportunity. That's what that means. But if you had 5 guys who could play the 5, right? Usually we think about the offensive flow and the rotation taking place amongst the guard, right? How would it take place amongst the interior big men as they played perimeter positions?
It wouldn't change.
It wouldn't change.
Because
so you would just be like one guy's playing the 5.
Yeah, it's just the offense. Like,
but couldn't you create more like
right?
down screens and switches and putting like players where they have a point guard on them at the high post?
Yes, absolutely. Like, but that's the thing though, is that you could do that in the typical offense anyways.
But it's kind of rarely done. Saying? It's sort of like usually like he's our center, he plays the 5. Like,
sure,
and then
but let's just say Giddy's playing your point guard, right? And then you have Chet playing your center, okay? And Giddy comes down, passes the ball over to Shea, right?
Right.
And then Chet goes and sets a screen, right? And then goes to the high post. He has the point guard on him at the high post, okay? So you just take that exact offense, right? And you implement it right there with the big men, and you're just having them move around. Yeah, a lot slower, but you still have your 3 guys out on that perimeter waiting for that open shot. And as big men, there's going to be double teams a lot because players won't be able to play them, Yeah. And you're going to get Chet open for a 3. You're going to get Mike Muscala, who's a deadly open 3-point shooter. Whoever else is out there. Poku, wide open shot. I mean, most teams would probably take that, but I think Poku's going to be a much better 3-point shooter than he was last year even. So, I'm all for it. I'm all for the funky, really strange lineups because, like, again, we talk about the 5-out offense and how it can morph and dwarf and go into this different, weird, funky ways. And I don't know why it would be any difference if you had 5 centers out there,
Yeah, and if you had the right motion, you could end up with Shea or Giddey running the 5 and the 5 out. Like, who else would you want other than one of those guys with the ball at the high post, with a mismatch where the team was tempted to send a double team? Because if you think about, like, positions players usually get, like, the double team, they're usually on the wing. It's usually somewhere around the mid post. But if you could command a double team at the top of the key, like, then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're looking at the defense. They're trying to disguise something, kind of like a great linebacker or a great defense in the NFL, like stunt and then send somebody else. You're just reading it, and then you're sending it and letting the ball go into rotation, and you're eating them up on the weak side. But that's the position that you want, like Giddey. That's the position you want Shea. I saw like a stat that like Shea's the most effective or top 3 most effective player at getting his good shots for his teammates, creating good shots. I don't know. I've just fucked up the stat, but it was like Luka, Trey, and then Shea, right? And it was like their top 3. And I think it's a really interesting thing. And I think Ja was number 4 because if you can, we want him attacking from the wing. But if you can create these offensive flows and systems where players are getting different looks at different positions and they know they're going to touch the ball multiple times in a single set, that's really important because then you're attacking different advantages than you would be if it was like, this is my chance.
And one of the greatest advantages we're going to have is that pick and roll or pick and sidestep and Chet following Shea to the basket. Because, I mean, let's just put it out there. Shea goes up, the center goes up. Shea's not going to try to go up against the center. He's throwing up a lob to Chet, who's following him. You know, like this is an asset that we haven't had before. And for us to understand truly how it's going to affect Shea, because think about it. If Chet's following and the center knows that Chet's following, how many times is the center going to go up against Shea trying to block Shea when he knows that Chet's going to throw it down? Like, he's going to stay with Chet, and he's going to last second, which doesn't work with Shea because Shea does that funky layup where it's like that running layup thing that, you know, in a center, if he's too late, it's already a layup. And that's the thing about it. It happens so fast. And having that connection with Shea and Chet is going to be more lethal than anybody recognizes. And we could talk about the connection with Shea and Giddey, but I'm telling you, it's going to be legendary, the connection between Shea and Chet. It's going to be legendary. It's going to be one of those things that we're all going to look back at and be like, holy cow, yes, we're going to see Giddey and Chet play for 10 plus years together. But it's going to be the Shea and Chet connection that's going to put us on the dot.
Boom, bro.
On the whatever.
Fuck yeah, dude. I don't even give a shit, dude. You got me fired up. I don't even care what dot we're going for. But you know what I'm talking about? We're talking about championships here, bro. And you're talking about legendary. Like, you can't talk about... It's
a connection, man. Think about it.
Yeah.
Chet
you
and
gotta
Shea
make a
connection.
run, dude.
Yeah. They have 4 years at least together. You know? At least 4 years together. By the end of that, everybody's going to be looking at it being like, okay, we have all these contracts that are up. Which of these guys are going to be able to keep? And it's going to be Shea and Chet, you know? And at that point, it's going to be, okay, who else are we going to fill?
What about Giddey, bro? Don't forget about Giddey, bro.
Well, it's always going to be Giddey. But I'm talking like the 2 guys that we're going to want to lock up in 4 years for like 100% long term. Like no doubt, you know, without blinking, anything else like that. It's going to be Shea and it's going to be Chet because in, 3 years we got to lock up Giddey. So that's a different lockup session.
Bro, we're just going to leave it right there because you talking about that Chet and SGA connection, it gets me fired up, and you don't
sexy, man.
You don't get known as legendary winning 19 games. Let's just put it that way, bro. It's going to take something more than that, and it's going to take this team shocking the world. But obviously, we expect something.
They're not
more
going
than
to shock
most
us,
people.
though, man.
Yeah, but you know what though? Like the ride, like actually seeing them do it. Like if you think about those big wins we had last year, and like there were some really big highs and really, really bad lows. But you think about like Shea hitting that shot against LA, like the Lakers, when it was kind of like early in the season when it was still like the Lakers were expected to be good. And he knocks down that logo shot to ice the game. And like, you're kind of like, okay, this is like, we're starting to see it, but nobody's respecting it because you don't get any respect until you get these win totals up quite a bit. So we don't have any respect, but now we're adding somebody that we think is elite. And we're like, to me, what gets me fired up, the reason we're probably going to run the longest podcast we've run in a long time is because, I mean, you're talking about me, like talking about shit that is like connections and combinations of players and matchups and shit that like I haven't heard anybody else talk about. So, I mean, I know other people are listening. Like, dude, I hope they dig into what you're saying because there's a lot of combinations out there that are really unique. And if you think about the old days, like back when analytics were first getting their run and we were seeing combinations like this type of stuff people used to really geek out about. They've calmed down about it quite a bit now. Maybe just the win total has done it, but I hope some people get out there and try to do some advanced analytics about what it would look like to have 5 centers, 4 centers, even 3 centers in the game at the same time, bro. But I'm pumped up about this, bro. I appreciate everybody taking the time, and Dave, as always, thanks for joining us, and we will see you on Friday. So thunder up, everybody.